Good day. I propose in this short video to complete this cycle of programs which I have done on the Russian-Chinese summit and on the realignment of China and Russia together as what has become in effect a de facto alliance, even though both countries are careful not to call it that way, and the distance that has now emerged between Russia and the Western states, the United States, but also the countries that make up the European Union, and Russia's decision to align itself increasingly with China against the West. I say this because we've seen a whole sequence of events over the last few weeks which have crystallized this shift in Russian policy. Firstly, there was the visit of Josep Borrell to Moscow, which I've discussed extensively in previous videos. Josep Borrell was the EU High Representative on Foreign Affairs who came to Moscow following the Navalny trial and imprisonment and sought to deliver a lecture to the Russians about their handling of their domestic policies. He found the Russians in an uncompromising mood and was sent packing back to Brussels with his tail between his legs. The Chinese, for their part, as I've also discussed in previous videos, gave the US a similar titanic drubbing at the recent summit between the US and China in Anchorage, Alaska. All of this was then followed by this incredibly friendly, even rapturous meeting between the Chinese leadership and Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, who visited China and was received by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang in Guilin to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Russian-Chinese Friendship Treaty. Over the course of those discussions, as I've discussed in a previous program, it became increasingly clear how close the relationship between China and Russia has become, and that they are in effect, if not in name, in a de facto alliance with each other. However, over the course of the press conference with Wang that followed the talks in China, Lavrov returned to the topic of Russia-EU relations, and it is this which I wish to discuss in this program. I say that because Lavrov made some really very interesting comments about the EU in this over the course of this press conference. Firstly, he made it quite clear that it is the cooling of relations between the EU and its member states and Russia which has played an important role in persuading the Russians that their future lies eastwards in a closer and more intimate connection to China. But perhaps more important than this is the fact that Lavrov places the blame for the collapse in relations on the EU itself as an organization rather than on the EU's member states. Lavrov seems to assume or believe that if there had not been an EU in existence, Russia's relations with various EU countries that now make up the EU, European countries perhaps as we should call them, would be a lot better than they are. Countries like Germany, Italy, France, Spain would probably be interested in maintaining a much more friendly relationship or active relationship with Russia than is the case now, and it is the EU system that is preventing them from doing so. The reason is that decisions on sanctions and other measures against Russia are taken at the EU level and are then imposed by the EU on the member states which are obliged to comply with them. Here is what Lavrov said, in which he essentially makes that point. These are his comments, which I take directly from his press conference. Russia and China do not ally against anyone. Geographically, our country is located on the vast Eurasian continent. China is our good neighbour. The EU is also. We have always been interested in promoting our relations across all areas. Europe has severed these relations and destroyed the mechanisms that have been created over many years. There are only a few European partner countries that have a desire to act based on their national interests. Obviously, this led to cooperation between Russia and China developing faster than what is left of relations with the European countries. Importantly, there are no relations with the EU as an organisation. The infrastructure was destroyed by unilateral decisions made by Brussels. If and when the Europeans decide to eliminate this anomaly in contacts with their largest neighbour, we will be ready to build up relations between us on the basis of equality and a search for a balance of interests. But so far, all has been quiet on the Western Front, whereas the East offers a very intense agenda, which is getting more varied every year. Now, note carefully the specific words that Lavrov uses. He says that in promoting our relations across all areas, Europe has severed these relations and has destroyed the mechanisms that were created over many years, so that only a few partner countries, European partner countries, have a desire to act as based on their national interests. So the key word here is national interests. In other words, the EU is preventing EU member states from pursuing their national interests by maintaining good relations or seeking good relations with Russia. It is the EU that is obstructing the national interests of these countries, which are served by better relations with Russia. And then he goes on to say that it is the EU as an organization with which Russia no longer has relations. The infrastructure was destroyed by unilateral decisions made by Brussels. In other words, it is Brussels, not Paris, Rome, Madrid, or perhaps even Berlin, that made the decisions to wreck relations. It was the EU as an organization with its headquarters in Brussels that took those decisions. And then he goes on to say that if and when the Europeans decide to eliminate this anomaly in contacts with their largest neighbour, we will be ready to build up relations between us on the basis of equality and a search for a balance of interests. In other words, again, Russia will not be dictated to, it will not be lectured to, it will not accept EU meddling in its internal affairs, and it insists that its concerns on topics like Ukraine, Georgia, eastward expansion of the EU, eastward expansion of NATO, and all the rest be heeded. But then, of course, he finishes, so far all has been quiet on the Western Front, whereas the East offers a very intense agenda, which is getting more varied every single year. So it is the EU as an institution, as an agency, that Lavrov blames for the bad relations which currently exist between Russia and Europe in general, and European countries in particular. I think that assessment has to be right. If one looks at this situation objectively, it is not Italy, France, Spain, or even Germany that took the various decisions that led to sanctions being imposed on Russia. If there had been no EU, it's inconceivable that there would have been sanctions imposed separately by any of these countries on Russia. It is inconceivable that there would have been this great push to try to draw Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia away from Russia and towards Europe. Those sort of things would simply not have taken place. It is the EU as an entity that has wrecked relations between Europe and Russia, and which is incapable of improving those relations. When Lavrov talks about the Europeans deciding to eliminate this anomaly in contacts with their largest neighbour, he is implying that the Europeans need to do something about the EU as an institution, because unless they do, and until they do, there is no prospect of relations between Russia and Europe, and between Russia and individual European states becoming better. I think, as I have said, that he is right, but it is interesting that Lavrov is talking in that way, and I am sure that his views and opinions about this are those which are now shared across the entire political elite in Moscow. At this present point in time, the EU and the countries that make up the EU have bad relations with all their neighbours. Britain has left the EU and is in the process of what is increasingly looking like an increasingly ugly quarrel with it. And there is now talk of Britain imposing tariffs, heavy tariffs, on imports of German cars, which is, of course, entirely contrary to what German national interests would be. As Lavrov says, relations with Russia have been completely wrecked. Turkey's relations with the EU are fraught and difficult also. It has been a remarkable achievement for the EU to have bad relations with all the strong member states, Britain, Russia and Turkey, diverse though those member states are, all at the same time. Moreover, the EU seems intent on making relations with all three of these countries worse and pushing them further away from itself. And in the meantime, as we've seen with German car exports to Britain and the business activities between the EU member states and Russia, the EU has in effect caused great damage to European businesses and European countries which depended very heavily on the trade with Russia. I've just been reading a report by a Greek Chamber of Commerce in which they showed the extent to which the Russian ban on agricultural exports from the EU to Russia, imposed in 2014 in retaliation to EU sanctions on Russia, have devastated large sectors of the Greek Greece's agricultural economy. Well, will anything change? The answer is, I'm afraid no. I can't see the EU changing its policies or its direction anytime soon. I think that the idea that the EU bureaucracy in Brussels is going to learn any lessons in its conduct of foreign policy or in terms of its meddling in the affairs of its member states, well, that simply isn't going to happen. Also, we must never forget that the EU only possesses the power over its member states that it has because some EU member states, notably Germany and France, have chosen that it should be so. Moreover, when we talk about the EU, we need to understand that the EU is essentially at the moment, or has been for the last few years, led partly by its bureaucracy, but also by Angela Merkel, who is, of course, the Chancellor of Germany, with all the various issues and priorities and even pathologies which she has. So one mustn't look for or expect any great change in the future. But it is also the case that the EU itself is coming under increasing strain and increasing stress, and that the pandemic has exacerbated it. Will that cause a change? Not so much in EU foreign policy, but in the EU structure itself, which might in time and in due course lead to changes in that foreign policy? Well, we shall just have to wait and see. Until then, and until that happens, as Sergey Lavrov has said, Russia will pursue its current trajectory of integrating ever more closely with China, progress being made, as he said, on the Eastern Front, whilst the Western Front remains quiet. Thank you for joining me for this program. I look forward to you joining me in future programs, both on this channel and on my other channel, the Duran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend Alex Christoforou. Please also check out Alex's channel, his own channel on YouTube, and please also check out our new channel, where we also do where we will publish our interactions with our viewers on our live shows. Also, please check us out on our other platforms, BitChute, Library, Rumble, and especially Odyssey. And please also, to the extent that you can and feel able, support us through Patreon, Subscribestar, and Patreon and PayPal. Please remember that we accept donations and payments in Bitcoin, obviously, but also in other such currencies. Last but not least, check out our shop, the wonderful things that we have there, our famous magic mugs, our superb t-shirts, 100% cotton, long-sleeved and short-sleeved, our sweatshirts, our hoodies, our hats, and I look forward to you joining me on my next program. Thank you for joining me on this one, and have a wonderful day.